Okay, so it's been another day of fast-moving developments on the Ukraine crisis, perhaps more specifically I should say the Crimea crisis. But just the latest on some of my thoughts. I've just read an interesting piece on France 24, which is something I thought I would never see, and that is Abby Martin, who's an American, she's an American citizen, but she works for RT. She's actually come out and condemned Russian actions in the Crimea, and that's something I never thought I would see from an RT correspondent. It will be interesting to see if she keeps her job after this, that she's dared to question Russian policy. But basically, at the end of the show, they showed a segment of this. She came out and said, from her heart, she criticises Russian actions in invading a sovereign nation, and that is the situation at the moment. Russia stands alone. Today there was a situation when a group of Ukrainian troops confronted Russian troops, and it could have been a very serious situation had someone actually got injured. What happened was a group of these Ukrainian troops approached a Russian checkpoint, I guess you would call it, in Sevastopol. They were unarmed but very vocal. They had a Ukrainian flag. Russian troops fired warning shots and there was a lot of verbals exchanged. Now, I think the fact that those troops were unarmed, the Ukrainian troops, shows that this threat that Putin keeps talking about in order to justify the invasion is baseless. Now, what I believe John Kerry said earlier was that if Russia has any solid evidence that there is a legitimate threat to people living in the Crimea, then there's other ways to deal with that. But to invade a sovereign nation, as Russia has done, is absolutely unjustified. And part of the issue here is that this is the entire basis for Russian intervention in Crimea, that there's just somehow they need to protect the Russian citizens there. Now, if anything, I have enormous respect for the restraint that Ukraine has shown. And if there is a situation where Russian speakers are being threatened, Putin should prove that. They should prove, the Russian side needs to prove this is the case. I haven't seen any evidence of that so far. I'm not saying it's not there, I'm just saying I haven't seen any evidence of it, because they keep promoting this as being the reason for invasion. But I think the real issue here is more to do with just the agenda of creating a greater Russia, because it's what we've seen since the end of the Cold War. This is something I mentioned in the other videos. But right now Russia stands alone. Even China has criticised Russia, and that's not a common event. Often China and Russia are on the same side at the Security Council. On this occasion, China has criticised Russian actions because the Chinese doctrine is very, very focused on the principle of sovereignty of any nation. And the world can see that Russia's violated Ukrainian sovereignty here. Russia is the aggressor. That is absolutely undeniable. Another point, Putin and Lavrov keep saying that this intervention is because Yanukovych was toppled in a coup. Well, he may have been democratically elected, but under Yanukovych, Ukraine was one of the most corrupt countries in the world. The Ukrainian people were fed up with Yanukovych and his corruption. They had a right, in a democratic society, to protest against his rule. So, to suggest this is some sort of coup is, I think, a distortion of the situation. The world can see that it's Russia being the aggressor here. That's pretty obvious. And Yanukovych just looks like a puppet to Moscow, basically. So, right now, the ball is in Putin's court, and I think he is going to face the pressure. Already the ruble has fallen. This is going to damage the Russian economy, even if full-on trade sanctions don't go ahead, because that's difficult for the EU to do. There's too much mutual reliance on Russia. But clearly Russia's going to be under pressure here, because international condemnation is mounting. There's been lots of anti-Putin protests in Eastern Europe. There's even been, and you'll not see this reported on RT, but there's even been anti-war protesters in Moscow. Because Putin hasn't ruled out a full-on invasion of Ukraine. He claims that he's not against the Ukrainian people, but the rhetoric is clearly belligerent. So, like I say, the ball's in Putin's court. I think a danger here is that he has moved in so far now, i.e. basically Russia has complete control of the Crimea, that if Putin was to pull back, that could harm him domestically in the polls, because there's a lot of nationalism going on right now from the Russian side. So Putin, of course, doesn't want to look weak. So he's in this situation where I think what's going to be the final outcome is Crimea is just going to be ceded into Russia. And that is going to lead to possible future conflicts, because Ukraine will never tolerate that. So Russian actions have inflamed the situation totally. And that's the latest developments from what I can see. Hopefully war can be averted, but I believe that it's Russia that has provoked the situation. And Russia stands alone right now. And this is not the first time that Russia has done this. There's many examples of it since the end of the Cold War. And I think the best solution right now, from what I can see, is for Russia to hold back and to start toning down the rhetoric. Whether or not Crimea is going to be ceded into Russia or not completely, they're talking about building a bridge, I don't know. But Russia's actions here have totally inflamed the situation.